Two-minute. 2-minute word. Got 2 minutes. That's the spooky.
Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. We were in a closed session, but we have reconvened, so we will begin the meeting at this point. This evening, we have a lot of wonderful things about to happen, so I'm glad to see so many people here to join us in the celebration and honoring some people and welcoming some people. So to begin, we'll please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and ask Lieutenant Brown to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll remain standing for a moment of silence to honor all those who serve the city as first responders.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Eddie.
Thank you. First on the agenda this evening is a proclamation. This is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, February 2023. I'm going to read the proclamation and then ask the council for a motion to adopt the proclamation. Whereas the need for greater public awareness of teen dating violence issues has never been more important, as teen dating violence impacts more than 1.5 million teens in the U.S. annually, and 1 in 12 teens will be subject to sexual and/or physical violence in their lifetime. Whereas it is essential to raise community awareness and to provide training for teachers, counselors, and school staff so that they may recognize when youth are exhibiting signs of dating violence. And whereas everyone has the right to lead to a safe and healthy relationship and be free from abuse. Whereas nonprofit support agencies like SAFE and Hunterdon deserve the highest recognition for their valuable service to those victims of domestic violence who are in danger and need of protection, comfort, and counseling, and for the provision of community resources and support services to victims, survivors, and families affected by teen dating violence. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the governing body of the city of Lambertville and the county of Hunterdon in the state of New Jersey does hereby declare February 2023 to be Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in Hunterdon County. And be it further resolved that the city of Lambertville hereby salutes those agencies and persons serving victims and survivors of teen dating violence, and encourages everyone to spread awareness surrounding teen dating violence. Have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second. Second. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now, I would ask that Police Sergeant Anthony Memolo, Police Officer Kevin Berheiko, Hanover County Deputy OEM Coordinator Andrew Camp, and Donald and Gavin have to step up here toward the, just right up here in front of the table. The proclamation to share this evening. Here. You can look at me. What's that? I was gonna go down in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas in the early morning of Thursday, January 12th, 2023, the Lambertville Fire Department was dispatched to a working fire at the South Hunterdon Apartments located at the corner of North Main and Perry Streets in the city of Lambertville. And whereas Lambertville Police Sergeant Anthony Memolo and Lambertville Police Officers Kevin Berheiko, Hunterdon County OEM Deputy Coordinator Andrew Camp, and volunteers from the Lambertville Fire Department, Donald and Gavin Hart, were the first to arrive on the scene. And whereas outfitted in protective gear, Mr. Camp pulled Mr. Sloan from the fire, and together with the firemen removed Mr. Sloan to a safe location, after which Mr. Camp, Sergeant Memolo, and Officer Berheiko largely extinguished the blaze. Whereas Officer Berheiko was treated for minor injuries at the Hunterdon Medical Center and released, Sergeant Memolo was transferred to Lehigh Valley Hospital Cedar Crest and was treated as an outpatient for smoke and is still being treated as an outpatient for smoke inhalation. The 3 firemen suffered no injuries. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the governing body of the city of Lambertville that the following individuals are gratefully acknowledged for their bravery and heroism: Sergeant Roman Anthony Memolo, Officer Kevin Berheiko, Mr. Donald Hart, Mr. Gavin Hart, Deputy OEM Coordinator, County of Hunterdon, Andrew Camp, all of the first responders who raced to the scene. Through preparedness and a driven dedication to service and public safety, these emergency responders are ever ready to answer the call. Be it further resolved that the governing body of the city of Lambertville expresses our heartfelt appreciation and thankfulness for their commitment, courageousness, and quick action. May I have a motion to adopt this proclamation?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll come down in just a moment, but I also want everyone to know that we will be additionally offering a life-saving award to these gentlemen. The life-saving award is presented to any member of a force whose prompt and alert action through disregard of personal safety results in saving a life.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So that's. Yes. No, we did picture somewhere.
I don't know. We just followed you.
Okay, that will not shock.
You're welcome.
Mayor,
Yes.
Is there a way to get like everybody in the picture?
I don't know. I'm not a photographer. What, the council come back here, maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
just
Oh,
two
yeah.
rows.
Hang tight.
So can I position everybody?
Please do. It's always a city clerk who has to do everything.
We're like stepping over here. Maybe you guys can go like, yeah, a little bit like that. Karen, we'll put it up, go ahead here. Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Lieutenant, would you get the picture?
Somebody stop the music. Sit down.
All right, everybody, I'm gonna on three, okay?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. I'm just gonna take a couple and we'll put the best one up, okay? All right, thank you, congratulations.
Thank you. So we have some officers to swear in this evening. This is a wonderful job. I can't say enough about our police department. I think that we are we're very blessed in the people who serve, certainly under the leadership of Lieutenant Brown. I've got to know all of these fine men over the last year. It's really been a great privilege to be among you and to work with you and to know that you are here safeguarding the city and also just being good all around kind of community advocates and participants. So I'm very glad and honored to have you all here, as well as other girls from the fire department. Your service is much noted and appreciated by all of us. And with that, I'd like to swear in Kevin Berheiko, Raymond Janita, and David Luto. So if you gentlemen will step up here, I will come down and we'll. You came first. Is that right? So raise your right hand. All right, and then repeat after me. I, Kevin Berheiko, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and the governments established in the United States and in this state, under the authority of the people, and I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all duties of a patrolman according to the best of my ability, so help me God. There, I'll take that. Thank you. All right. Good around. How are you? Yeah, you nervous? Okay, I'm nervous. I'm always nervous apparently in these meetings. All right, so raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Raymond Janito,
I, Raymond Janito,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United
of
States
the United States
and the Constitution of the State
and the Constitution of the State
of New Jersey.
of New Jersey,
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the same
and the governments established
and the governments established
in these United States
in these United States
and in this state,
and in this state,
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the people,
And that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly perform
and justly perform
all duties of a patrolman
all duties of a patrolman
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Careful.
Yeah. I, David Lugo,
I did,
do solemnly swear
you solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the same
and the governments established in the United States
and the governments established in the United States
and in this state,
and in the state,
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the people,
And that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
partially,
and justly perform
and justly perform
all duties of patrolman
all duties of a patrolman
according to the best of my ability,
and to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
One big round of applause. Photos, photos.
I know where to stand.
Okay, everybody knows where to stand. Same spots.
It's easy to Photoshop.
Okay.
Thank you. Tell me. Watch your step.
Take a moment here for anybody who wants to.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Glad
thank
came.
you.
Not all of them, Paul.
Leave one
We're
open.
gonna leave one open. All right. Moving on. Approval of the minutes. Just a note here, the minutes are Some of the minutes have been completed but not edited, and some have not been completed, so we are going
Could
to.
you please use the mic, Mayor?
Sure.
With everything else
Yeah.
out
Yes, I was talking about the minutes, it's so fascinating. We're just saying that the minutes aren't ready, so we will take them up at the next meeting. All right. The administrative reports entered into the record. Were there any questions about the administrative reports from the council? Okay. Hearing none, I would ask for motion to accept the administrative reports into the record.
So moved.
Second, please. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. So public participation. This is the time, the council meeting where we have now public comment at two points in the council, in the ordinance. I'll just run through the policy as I do each time we meet. Members of the public shall provide comments from the designated podium unless they request flexibility because of mobility issues. We ask members of the public to state their name and their address. You have uninterrupted remarks and or questions from members of the public shall be limited to 3 minutes. No person shall address any specific council member nor any person in majority of the council. Members of the public who are present in person shall speak first. Members of the public who attend via Zoom will speak thereafter. The chair or the council members may respond. So bearing that in mind, if there are members of the public in the room who would like to speak, and the first public, I would just note, the first public comment period is for items on the agenda. This is only for items on the agenda. The second comment period at the end of the meeting is for any new business or items that are not on the agenda. Good evening.
Good evening. Paul Stevens, I do have one more question though. For the second reading of the ordinance, are we supposed to be making comments now or during the public hearing part?
During the public hearing. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Okay, great. Once you've got that,
Good evening, Lori Stagnino, African Animal Welfare. Not really sure what to say because I really don't know what's going on anymore. But I will say that this has been a crazy, confusing ride for the past 4 months since I met Andrew in your office on that October day, presenting myself as an animal welfare expert in Lambertville, offering advice on the best animal control person that should be hired for the city. It's just shocking that we've had such a roller coaster experience with trying to hire 2 animal control companies that have very bad reputation. When the residents and myself keep cheerleading for Carolyn Murphy, and it seems like it should not be this difficult for a $10,000 contract. Seems like this one should have been one of the easy ones where you're like, okay, the experts want her, the residents want her, standard contract. She works in a lot of other towns, townships. So we don't know what's gonna happen when you all start the animal control part of this meeting. So I guess I'll just wait and see and comment at the end. But I just want to note my frustration and disappointment with the process these past 4 months.
Any of the members in the room who wish to speak to anything?
Mary Ann Borge, 5 Broughton Court. Just wanted to say that I am in favor of the modifications to the flood damage prevention ordinance. I think that we're maybe kind of hard to swallow, but I think that we're in a place where we need to do everything we possibly can to fortify the city against flooding and other climate-related issues. And, you know, I just think that we need to do what we can. It makes us all a stronger community.
Anyone else? Do we have anybody online?
One.
All right. Oh,
Okay, just to make sure, we're supposed to actually wait to talk about that until.
well, yeah, you
The
can,
hearing,
you
right?
can talk about it at the public hearing, or, yes, that's fine. Thanks. You could let me know who that is.
Doug online. You can go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? You can hear me? Yeah, so name is Doug Poach. I live at 268 North Union. I wanted to express my full support for the initiative to extend the FEMA rules to the 500-year floodplain to residences and homes in that 500-year floodplain. By way of background briefly, for many years, I acted as an attorney representing insurance companies in claim issues. And thereafter, I was a claim executive at managing a claim organization for one of the larger insurance companies in the United States. A couple of points I'd like to make. First, about flood and homeowners insurance. And second, about what it means if you need to comply with these regulations. And that is from firsthand experience. We were flooded, North Union, and we had to comply with the substantial damage regulations. So first on flood and homeowners insurance. We live in a river town, and whether you're a 500 or 100-year floodplain resident, you should protect, our residents should protect their most valuable asset, their home. Homeowners is going to exclude flood losses. Flood insurance should be acquired by anyone who lives in a river town. Generally, public insurance companies will not write flood insurance. It's simply too unprofitable. The federal government does that. They retain those insurance companies that we've heard. For example, we had an Allstate to underwrite the policy and also manage the claims, but FEMA actually takes all the risk. The federal government takes all the risk. It is simply too unprofitable for insurance companies to write this business. There's too much risk, there's too much loss. From a buyer's perspective, from our residents' perspective, it is a smart purchase for everyone, particularly in a river town, regardless of where you sit. It is a good buy, it's a great value. Frankly, if I had a choice and I could only afford one, living in a river town like we do, I would purchase the flood insurance over the homeowners insurance because I think the risk is greater around that. Residents will not be required to purchase flood coverage via this new ordinance. It's a choice that they have to make. But regardless of whether this ordinance was put into place or not, they should. I could speak more about some of the ins and outs of the insurance, but to just kind of bring some brevity here. Second, to this issue of what does it mean to comply with these regulations? At the time of the flood, my wife and I had our 2-year-old grandson sleeping over. Water was leaking into our basement, pumps. I was moving pumps and the front basement wall blew out on us. The hydraulic pressure was too much. My wife and I grabbed our grandson and we left. We got in my truck and got out of town. We were concerned about the stability of our home. So what does it mean? Fast forward, we had to comply, gravel, cement cap, and raise the utilities. My wife and I now are secure in our safety. We can have our grandson sleep over and not worry about that kind of issue, the stability of our home. Second, and probably more important, the flood, my flood insurance went down about 60 to 70% from the changes we made. Very important for all of our residents to understand that. I'll wrap it up there. Okay, thanks.
I appreciate it. Mayor, I'm getting a message that some people are trying to get on Zoom, they're not able to.
We have 18 people right now.
Is there anyone in the waiting room?
The way it's set up as a webinar, there is no waiting room.
You started phones last night, so. Anybody else online?
Yes, there's another person.
Judy, you can go ahead.
figured it all out.
Wait a second.
I didn't know they were going to be that tight.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Judy Gleason, 86 North Union Street. I have just 3 things that I want to identify for your attention. The first is with respect to the resolution number 49, 2023, talks about the chamber repaying the city for a dollar amount for the police parking and meter fees, garbage and trash for Shad Fest. I think we should have a number on what that is expected to be. Part of it, I know we know, part of it we might not know, because the business community kind of needs to know where they're going with their attempts to work with business and increasing business. And that amount of money that the chamber has to spend means that's money that may or may not be as useful to the businesses as that some people think the Shad Fest is. So that's my first point. My second one is with respect to the animal control part. We changed in this past several months from a year agreement to a 6-month agreement. And if possible, I would like to know what will happen to measure the activity of the animal control entity so that we know why the 6-month gives us enough information for whatever it gives us information for. That came up with a different outfit before, and I don't know if we have a plan of reviewing how they function in 6 months so that we know what's what. And so I'm asking that.
They're going to vote on this ordinance.
Yeah, they are. Thirdly, as to the ordinance, number 1, 2023, I think this is a sort of a complicated set of information, and we don't have yet the minutes from the discussion. There's been at least one discussion I know because I was at the meeting, but I didn't retain all the points that were made. And so I'm asking if that doesn't, I don't think that has to be passed tonight. And I think people need more time to understand elements of that, including points that were just made by the previous speaker. And so since I think people can use more time, they can use having access to minutes. I tried to listen to the recording. It's not as easy to get a lot of information by the recording as you might think it is, because oftentimes the speaker is not clearly audible, including council members speaking. So those are my points, and thank you.
She didn't get this for you, 2-minute warning, 30-second warning. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm done.
No, I just had the punch line.
What was that?
Still hear you. Hang on a second, Judy. All right. Just a couple of quick follows upstairs. The costs related to Shad Fest are they're fairly consistent from year to year, and they are discussed between the city, the police, the DPW. So what?
I have a number if you want.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
The numbers in the memorandum, excuse me, of understanding that this resolution approves, and for the meters for 2 days at $12 per day, the total is $3,262.
Thank you. So those costs, I think, have been all identified. Cindy, is that right? They have been discussed, Lieutenant Brown, Cindy, the chamber. So the Chamber of Commerce is not going into this Shad Fest not knowing what the costs are. They have a very good idea of what the specific costs are. The only variables might be a little bit with salaries and overtime, possibly, but very small.
Well, and from time to time, they don't always use the full meters. So sometimes they'll use more, sometimes they'll use less.
Well, I think that's all I'm going to address at the moment. We'll talk about the flood ordinance in a few minutes. Anybody else online?
No, they both spoke.
Okay. Seeing nobody else in the room and nobody else online, I have a motion to close the public comment period, please.
So moved.
Second, please. All those in favor of closing the public comment period, please say aye.
Aye.
Next is our resolutions. This is the consent agenda. The following resolutions on the consent agenda are considered routine and shall be enacted by one motion. Should any member of the city council seek separate discussion of any item, that item shall be removed and discussed separately. Anybody on the council want to discuss anything separately?
Just one quick question. I see we're reapplying to Delaware Watershed Conservation Fund. Is there a figure we're applying for? Or am I missing?
Delaware, I'm sorry.
It's read 422023.
Oh, right, to
The grant.
National Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a number connected to that? There is. So the total amount requested is $308,000 with the matching contributions, which can be in-kind contributions of $336,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion to accept the consent agenda, please? Sorry, a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Next on the agenda is resolution number 53-2023. This is a resolution to authorize the mayor, the city clerk, and the city attorney to execute a contract with Advanced Animal Control Solutions for a 6-month term to provide animal control services at a rate not to exceed $971. So I'm just going to talk, at our last meeting, where we left off was we had established a subcommittee comprised of the council president and Councilman Lyde to do some kind of follow-up in regards to the animal control officer situation. We were not able to pass a resolution last time for a temporary animal control officer. So I'm just going to go through the timeline here. This will just take a couple of moments. This is a very kind of high-level tour of what's happened since our last meeting and kind of where we are at the moment. So the subcommittee met with Caroline Murphy on January 21st, which was 2 days after our city council meeting. In preparation for that meeting, the city clerk sent the council president a segmented list of specifications and requirements, a quote sheet, and the advanced animal contract proposal from November 7th, 2022. Council President Stegman sent notes from that meeting to the city attorney and myself on January 23rd, so just 2 days later. Councilman Lyde forwarded a copy of Carolyn's proposed contract to the city attorney and myself on January 30th. Between January 30th and February 9th, various emails regarding the contract were exchanged between the city attorney, the city clerk, and myself. Bill, can you just talk for a minute about kind of what the typical appointment process is and how this one might be different?
Can you pass the mic down?
Beginning with like the
Well,
public
yeah, I mean,
contracts portion.
yeah, what would we normally do to hire a contractor or a professional?
The process is usually that we either solicit bid, depending on what the service we're requesting. The city will either go out to bid or issue requests for proposals to determine, to receive bids or proposals as to the various services that will be appointed. That all depends on what kind of service it is. In this instance, animal control, it's a competitive contracting award, it's not a bid. So the city is not required to point to the lowest responsive bidder. I can review the proposals and pick the one that they think fits the city best based on whatever they received. At that point, recommendations made by the administration as to who is to be appointed, and resolutions presented to the council for their approval or disapproval, whatever the council's pleasure is. In this instance, I think that was pretty much the case. The first few iterations of resolutions that appeared on agendas, after there was no consensus, I think that changed, and the subcommittee was going to basically review the contracts and then make a recommendation to the administration as to how to proceed. So we received that information. It was reviewed. Apart from having the subcommittee appointed, I think it pretty much
not being able to vote or not having a favorable vote to appoint an animal control officer. That was, over the course of a few meetings, it was unusual, but it led to the process that the city followed. So, the city, the administration reviewed the proposals. And, I think from there, the normal course was mostly followed. We reviewed the proposal, prepared a draft agreement, and now it's back on the council agenda for an appointment for that.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, just to reiterate, so between January 30th and February 9th, there were a number of emails between Bill, myself, and Cindy about the contract. On February 14th, I sent a copy of the proposed contract to Carolyn Murphy. And I know that I did this as a courtesy. We don't typically send contracts out before we appoint. This is an unusual circumstance. Did not happen at any point last year. And I think it's fairly out of the norm. But we did it as a courtesy. So I sent that out. There were several clarifying emails about some things between Carolyn and the city. And where we are at this point is that there are 2 points, there are only 2 unresolved issues. So the 2 issues are these. So in regard to notifying the police of an incident, I wanted some specific language about how quickly that would happen. I didn't, Carolyn said that she wanted to file a report in a timely manner. I felt as though that was not specific enough, so I said I would like a 24-hour period, and something that our past animal control officer did. In fact, our past animal control officers often called when they were on their way into the city to let the police know that there was some kind of incident occurring. So that was an unresolved issue. Over the course of those emails, she mentioned that she preferred it in a timely manner, and I suggested, well, if 24 hours wasn't enough time, I would consider 48 hours. But I did think that it's important to have a structured time there. It's an accountability thing. The police really do need to know what's going on in our city. If it's a dog bite or any one of a number of kind of practical considerations, I think it's important to know. So that was one of the two matters on which we had a difference. The other one was a background check. We do require a background check for this contract because the contractor, the animal control office will have access to the police department, residents' private property, and so forth. And this is fairly typical for the city. Our contractors do have to submit to policy. It's not written, but it's been our policy to ask contractors who come into the city to do background checks. So for example, the cleaners at City Hall have to have a background check because they're in City Hall and they're public documents and so forth. And even the tow truck company we use has to have a background check because, they're on private property, they're dealing with residents, possessions. So, that's where we left off. So, my last email from Carolyn was that she couldn't meet the terms of this. So these are, as far as I'm concerned, these are the only 2 kind of outstanding terms. I'd be happy to have a conversation about the 48-hour time period. I'm not sure what that was. There was no specific reply or reasoning for kind of rejecting that. So that's where we are. I do think that I would note that, in our last email to the city, Carolyn said that she was not comfortable with the contract. And that said, she has a good history with residents in the city. People do like her, they do respect her. I would hope that if we move forward and appoint her this evening, that she will reconsider on those 2 points and be able to meet those requirements and we can move forward and make sure that the animals here in the city are duly looked after. So, that's basically where we are. And, at this point, I would entertain a motion from the council for the appointment of Carolyn Murphy and her company to the position of animal control officer.
Before we discuss that, can I make a statement about it? Sure. Yeah. I think it's unfortunate Ms. Murphy is not here. Yeah. I think it's unfortunate Ms. Murphy is not here to address these issues because she did make it very clear why she couldn't agree to some of these terms. She works with many other municipalities and she thinks it's unfair to offer Lambertville something she's not offering to the other municipalities. And she works with Ewing, she works with Hopewell. She was very clear about that. These are standard contracts that every other township has agreed upon. And apparently we can't come to an agreement. So when Council President Stegman and I met with her, personal reviewed her qualifications, they're fantastic. So I'm not prepared to move on this because she has not agreed to the contract. So why would we vote on something when the person who we're voting to approve isn't in agreement with us? That makes no sense. So my recommendation is that we have the city attorney speak to her attorney and see if we can come to. And then when we do, then we should vote on it. So I don't think we should vote on this now. I think it's really inappropriate.
Okay. Does anybody else on the council have anything to say?
Yeah, just following up on that, I do think that, not being privy to this email exchange, that, I always think that in terms of trying to get to yes, that getting to people to talk rather than to exchange emails is probably a more productive thing, and rather than put us at, some weird place where we're sending paper and email back and forth, we have this conversation, see if we can get to yes and have a contract that we can vote on rather than throwing something out there with, and show some consideration to getting there. Because it seems like we're very close and it's kind of,
I agree, and I certainly expressed in my first email a willingness to talk to Ms. Murphy. She had my telephone number. I was more than happy. I said I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with her. She responded to my email, and it just looked like it was going to be kind of back and forth with emails for the time being. My last email with her was, sort of getting closer to everything with the exception of these 2 points. So, my concern with not moving forward with, Ms. Murphy can either accept these two, these two matters, or she can, if we move forward with appointing her tonight, we can have a conversation, and if the terms of the contract were to change, that would be one thing. I'm not willing to change. I'm not willing to go back on a background check. I think it's too important. I think we require it. If that's the only thing holding us up, if we can't come to an agreement about what a timely manner is, I don't know. I mean, my thinking on this is it's perfectly reasonable to ask someone who's coming in to handle animal issues in the city to call the police department within a day. So, I'm willing to have a conversation with Ms. Murphy about that, but I think it's a reasonable request. So I'm not sure if these are the only 2 points that are holding us back. What, I don't know. I'm happy to, let me just finish this, if I may. If the council won't vote on this appointment tonight, then, we go another 3 or 4 weeks with no hope of having, this just ties this up continuously. This is a statutory position, which we are required to have. We're now 6 weeks into the year, and the council, we have not been able to make any progress on appointing someone. So here we have somebody who's interested in the job. We have many people here who've spoken in favor of her. I'm ready to move forward with the appointment. If Ms. Murphy can meet the conditions of our contract, then she can have the job.
I've spoken to her about the background check, and her concern was that it was unilaterally applied to her, so that is not a sticking point. However, on the time of notice, it was my understanding there that you originally said that that was not an issue, and then you told Ms. Murphy that, and then you sent her an email with a contract that both Council President Stegman and myself were not on, and so she was obviously rather surprised by it. So that would be why why we're in this position now. So she has a contract with multiple other municipalities that has been approved, and apparently it's not good enough for us. That's the issue. So if we want to hire her, we could use the standard contract that every other town has used.
Well, the contract is the contract. We use our own contract, right? So Bill, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but if there's a question about the contract.
The issue is with the time notice. Every other town doesn't have a problem with that. Apparently you do.
So I don't understand what 24 hours, what is, I just don't find it acceptable.
Excuse me. So what I'm hearing is we have this resolution for a contract and we don't have agreement with the recipient of the contract. I have to say, I have a concern about voting for something that has that much, unresolved, in it, because what is the strategy? What is the plan for negotiating with Ms. Murphy to get her to yes? Where, how are we going to get there? Because if we vote on this and we say yes, and Ms. Murphy continues to refuse to sign it, then we're no better off than we are right at this moment. And then, you know, like, what's the plan here? Like, how do we have to have a strategy for moving this forward, not just getting something approved by members of the governing body. That's kind of where I am.
Bill, did you want to just talk about the contract?
Yeah, with the notice provision, I think that just based on my time with the city and just my experience with local government, the animal control records that are kept, they're required to be kept by statute, first of all. Second, they're often the subject of Oprah requests. And the city has an obligation to maintain these records. So I think the city can be flexible as to the time frame. But I also think, you know, in a reasonable manner or in a timely manner, I think that's too open to negotiation. That's one of the reasons that, you know, we wanted a more definite period in the contract. We wanted a certain number of days, a certain number of hours, whatever, however it was going to be structured. But, you know, one person's interpretation of timely or reasonable is different than someone else's. And it's, you know, if the city has to maintain these records, it has an obligation to maintain them, it should have some idea of when they're going to be received. So that was really the only concern about the provision of records.
Pardon me, well, wouldn't that be satisfied by the monthly report that's required?
Maybe. I just, you know, if something were to happen in the city and, you know, we had to, you know, on the second, or I don't know when the report is issued, the first of the month. You know, if something happened early in the month, the city's then waiting 3 or 4 weeks for records. I wouldn't want to just rely on that. These are, you know, a lot of these records, if it relates to something as serious as a dog bite or something of that nature.
Well, aren't there, isn't there a procedure in place if someone responds to a dog bite?
Yes, there's the 10-day requirement.
It doesn't matter
It's laid out.
whether it's the police or her doing it, correct?
Correct. It's just, I think the city wanted the certainty of getting the records as soon as possible. And, you know, to that end, I think that's where the shorter time frame originated. It's certainly a policy issue, that's for sure.
But don't most of these come from the police anyway? This is a very small, unique thing where it's only when residents contact her directly. Most of the time, the calls go to the police station and we don't have this issue at all. So this is a non-issue. And if you're so concerned about filling this position, this is a 6-month position. Let's give her a shot. Let's see if we have a problem. And if we do have a problem, then we know at the end of the 6-month term, we need to have that term. To me, that makes the most sense.
But she's not willing to agree to the terms.
No, and I agree with that.
And that's, to me, this is like, it's like, it's just the swirl. I mean, you know, something has to change to get us beyond where we are. And that's my question. How do we change that? I actually have one comment and a question about the background check thing. So my comment is, if the 24-hour thing is needed because we might have an Oprah request, as opposed to a monthly report, I mean, then you reach out to her and say, hey, we got an Oprah request. We need that monthly, we need the data from, you know, from day X. We need it now because we got an Oprah request for that. So we need you to expedite that information. That to me is like a standard transactional arrangement that you would have with any service provider. And, you know, stuff happens. And like our contractors they understand that. They know that the things are not going to always be, you know, by a certain timeline. That's one thing. The second question I have, and this is just for my own education, but I was thinking about this background check requirement, and I'm wondering, in order to be certified as an animal control officer, is there some sort of background check that goes along with that? I'm kind of, I don't know. Is that a requirement in order to obtain that certification? And I don't know. That's a question I'm asking, which could make this whole background check requirement on our end superfluous. That's why I'm asking the question.
When I reviewed for the state license, the regulations, they don't say anything about background.
Okay,
So, I mean, if there are employers or companies that require that to hire a person, that's a different story. But as far as the regulations go, there's nothing in the regulations that says
okay,
you have to have a clear background.
Okay.
And it's just,
Thank you.
it's the education component. And I think there's a second component that I'm forgetting.
Do we require this for St. Hubert's, by the way?
I don't know.
Yeah, I always did background check. The St. Hubert's was years ago. We started that years ago, and I honestly don't remember. That was 2017.
But
I'd have to go back.
they
and
were the
look
most
at that.
recent contract, right?
They were.
But-
However, they were for years, and we had the same people for years. So I honestly don't remember.
If I can add, went through the statute today, and if the only requirement that I saw was that they cannot, if they're on the bad list, it's listed on the state website, and they cannot be hired. So there is, if someone has done something that is opposed to what the ordinance, the law says about certification, their company is declassified, so to speak. It's on the do not hire list. So that, and I also reached out to try to get the question answered that Ben had, and I haven't heard back whether there is a requirement. So you've been digging a little bit longer than I have on this. I know in some licenses, that's a license, real estate license, you're fingerprinted. And you do a background check, and every year you have to say that you've been a good real estate agent, didn't break the law. But I guess the reason I bring it up is because there's a way to determine whether their certification is still in effect. And that's public knowledge on the site.
And certainly, and we received copies of the certifications. So that was never. an issue.
Well, it's one thing about receiving a copy of the certification. But you could have the certification and then wind up on the list and still have the certification in your hand.
Understood, the certification was never the issue.
Yeah.
It was, it was the other two issues of merit.
Were those, was the 48 hours, was that in the St. Hubert's contract too?
No, because St. Hubert's typically called right away. Lieutenant Brown can speak to this. They're very timely. There's never an issue in terms of reporting.
But we have great references from this person, so why do we think this is going to be an issue? I don't understand.
Okay, so if it's a 6-month contract, I'm willing to concede that if we want to try it with her language, a timely manner, that's fine. I think it's, I just feel like it's reasonable to request something, right? Especially when you're starting out in a relationship, right? So, if we want to go with a timely manner, let's go with a timely manner, and we'll reassess it in 6 months. Happy to do that. We would still need to make the appointment, and Ms. Murphy would still need to agree to the background check, which is not negotiable. So if the council is willing to do that, I'm willing to give it a try for 6 months. We'll keep an eye on it. So, if we don't move forward with an appointment, we're nowhere. If we move forward with an appointment predicated on Ms. Murphy agreeing to a background check, then that could be, we could be up in business in the next couple of days.
I've already spoken to her about the background check. She doesn't have a problem. She's already passed multiple background. That's not an issue, so.
All right, well, I appreciate it. I'm sorry.
I'm happy, I'm satisfied with the mayor saying that we're not gonna put in this new term, this 48 hours, we're gonna stick with the timely notice. And obviously, the city has a policy on background checks. I don't think that's an issue with me at all, I think that makes sense. So I'm happy to.
Okay, before you do, I just need to make one clarification. You spoke about me making a comment about reporting, not being open to that. That was a conversation held early on in the process. following that, in the final kind of run through with the clerk and Bill and Lieutenant Brown, was determined, it was suggested that a clear time frame would be better. So, that's where I locked in. So, I would just note that, we have conversations all the time, but until something actually comes into a contract or is a formal proposal, it's just an idea. So calling me out on that, I was not appreciated.
Well, I'm the one that spent the time dealing with her, and so I'm the one that got the phone call from her, so that's why I bring that up.
Thank you. Okay. Right.
So I just, can we just kind of recap what we're proposing here?
We're proposing moving forward with the contract. Everything, I have the emails here. Everything else it seems to have been worked out. I think there might be one question about insurance on a car. There was a paperwork thing, which we might just note for the record that there was one small.
The insurance wanted the car insurance to name the city as additional insured. It's a liability issue.
So I think that's been met, but we'll have to follow up on that one point. So what we would be doing here would be appointing Ms. Murphy, predicated on her agreeing to have a background check and to report to the police department in a timely manner, all incidents in the city.
And for 6 months.
For 6 months.
This date or whatever, just for,
Well,
just to be.
well,
I don't
6
know,
months,
yeah.
well, Bill, it would be 6 months from the date she signed the contract, or?
It would be a 6-month contract. That's the language of the.
So when does the date start?
When would it start? When she
Starting
signs-
when?
when she gets the contract, when she signs the contract?
The date of last signature, so usually the city signs last, so.
Okay.
Just for
So that would probably be
And
sometime early
Then
next
just
week.
make sure that also I just added, this is what I have. Move forward with the contract. The auto insurance has to name the city as additional insured. Report to the police in a timely manner, and background check, and the contract will be for 6 months.
Everybody understand?
Okay.
All right, may I have a motion, please? I'll make a motion. May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. I have a motion to approve the bills list, or are there any questions about the bills list? Any questions? Okay. If there are any questions, thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. May I have a second? Thank you.
This along.
All those in favor of paying bills, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Ordinance first reading, just to let you know, we've got a few ordinances kind of in the hopper here. We're really making some amendments to the Human Rights Council ordinance in the coming months. There are some, we expect to have some amendments to the zoning ordinance. There's one minor amendment to the escrow levels that was missed in the last. And there will be amendments to the setback requirements for the zoning ordinances. Ordinance the second reading, ordinance number 01-2023. This is an ordinance by the City Council, City of Lambertville, amending the City of Lambertville Code of Ordinances to repeal Chapter 19, to adopt a new Chapter 19, to adopt flood hazard maps, to designate a floodplain administrator, and providing for the severability and an effective date. Note that we did, you brought copies of the memo, and
They're out there.
Okay. So we did have copies of the memo that was written by Ken Rogers, the construction code official and floodplain manager, as well as some maps. So we first introduced this last on February 2nd work session. This was posted to the city website, on the city's bulletin board on February 3rd. The notice was advertised in the Wednesday, February 8th, 2023 edition of the Trenton Times. Would also note for the record that we had a public informational session last Wednesday. What was that date? Somebody know what the date was? Anyway, last Wednesday. We'll figure out the date. So I'm going to open the public hearing for ordinance number 01-2023 and ask for any council comments at this time.
Public comment first.
Yeah.
Which would be.
Well, we can do, yeah, we can do public comments first. Sure.
Let's do public. I'd like to make public comment.
Okay. So I'd like to open this up for public comments. If, same rules apply as before. State your name and your address. 3 minutes to uninterrupted time to make your remarks and or questions. Council may or may not respond.
Paul Stevens, 39 Quarry. I have a problem with section 101.5. Ordinary building maintenance and minor work improvements defined as ordinary building maintenance and minor work projects by the Uniform Code of Conduct, including non-structural replacement of kind of windows, doors, cabinets, plumbing fixtures, decks, walls, partitions, new floor materials, roofing, etc., shall be evaluated by the floodplain administrator through the flood plan development permit to ensure compliance with the substantial damage and substantial improvement section 103.14 of this ordinance. Problem with this is, if somebody, the way this reads to me, is if somebody wants to replace the faucet in their kitchen, they still have to go through a flood permit if they're in zone 1 or zone 2, so that the flood plan administrator can be sure that it's not a substantial improvement to their house, even though it's obvious. This just leads to more burden on city personnel. Clearly, this floodplain administrator is going to be, well, I should say clearly, but in all probability, it's going to be a shared responsibility. This other person, the person who fills this with their other responsibility is going to have extra duties. It's going to cause extra cost to people that want to make minor improvements to their house. At the last meeting, when this was first read in, when Gina Ms. Bichetti brought this up, it was told, well, that's only in the case of substantial damage. No, when you read this, it says this has to be done so they can determine whether or not there was made substantial damage. Okay? And that just seems to be an undue burden, adds to inefficiency in the government, just increases the cost of trying to get anything done around here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Ken Rogers online? He's not. Are you sure? I think he said he was going to be here. Okay. We can follow up with that question at a later time. I thought that Ken was going to be here. He said he was going to be online this evening. We did have a conversation about substantial improvement recently. Substantial improvement in the floodplain ordinance only triggers if you're doing one project at a time, right? So you can, over a period of time, do a lot of small projects without triggering it. So one year you could do your kitchen, another year you could do your bathroom. So, it's my understanding from Ken, from this conversation we just had today about substantial improvement, that if it's spaced out over time, it doesn't trigger. So and the substantial damage determination is a one-time event, right? So, if you have $5,000 worth of damage in one storm and $10,000 in a storm 2 years later, that's not going to trigger substantial damage determination. It's a one-time event. So I can't answer anything more than that. So unless Ken is on.
Ken says he's online.
All right, so hang on a second. So why don't you let Ken respond, please?
Have any phone numbers that don't have anything attached to them? I just give him a second. I just asked him.
Raise his hand to see
Huh?
you. Is it possible for him to raise his hand to see you?
We do have other hands raised, but that's not him. Oh, Spanish Princeton.
That's him.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so, okay. Allow to talk, okay.
Okay, Ken, you're on.
Hello, hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Ken. Did you hear the question, Paul Stevens' question?
Yes, that I got distracted about trying to text people that I am here. I didn't know how my computer signed me in. That was about the substantial improvement in ordinary maintenance issues. That language there is specific language required by the DEP. It's not something we can change. Does it present an extra problem for me as a floodplain administrator? Yes, there's extra work I have to do. Does that mean somebody has to come get a permit for changing a faucet? No, we would never require that. That's talking about somebody actually doing work to their house. Somebody wants to repaint, they want to put in new carpet. they're going to be able to do that without any question. And we're not going to require floodplain development permits for that. It's when they're actually doing some work, some significant work to the house. And that substantial improvement section only applies to people in the 100-year floodplain. It's no different from our current ordinance. The same thing would apply under our current ordinance. And then within the 500-year floodplain, the only time we would get a flood hazard development permit is for substantial damage. That would be a fire or a flood that caused substantial damage. Then they would have to come in full compliance with the ordinance. As floods are getting worse, eventually that is going to happen somewhere down the line. We're just trying to be proactive and trying to keep the city resilient and ahead of what could happen in the future. And it's only going to apply to them if there is that substantial damage. If they want to improve their home in the 500-year floodplain, there's no flood permit requirements for that, for doing improvements to your home, none whatsoever. And the 100-year floodplain, things haven't changed. This new ordinance makes it it's no different. Requirements are exactly the same as they always have been.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.
Anyone else in the room?
Hi there, Ann Nicholas, 85 Clinton Street. This is a very complex issue, very complicated. I was on the Zoom last Wednesday, so I'm not an expert. So what I'm about to say is not, there are people I know online who are going to say things that are much better than what I'm about to say. But essentially, I am against including the 500-year floodplain in this for sort of a variety of reasons. I want to take a look at some of the rationale in the memo that talks about why including the 500-year floodplain is being done. The first reason talks about the study that showed that flood insurance claims, I think the mayor said 25% of flood insurance claims are made by property owners outside of the 100-year zone. Most of the people in the 500-year floodplain don't have flood insurance. The people who know that their house is flood, those are the ones who have gotten the insurance. So in my mind, this doesn't apply to the 500-year zone people anyway. This is the people where all of us know in the flood, right, and various floods that have happened over the last 15, 20 years, which parts of town is flood. And they're not necessarily, what you would think by the river. So I think, to that point, I don't think that is a good reason to include the 500-year plan. Same for number 2, flood insurance claims have been repeatedly paid without any requirement to the flood prevention measures. Again, the 500-year floodplain people largely don't have flood insurance unless their house already floods. I also want to sort of go to a point about the remediation. So if flood insurance is being, if you don't have flood insurance, like most people in the 500-year floodplain, and let's say you have a fire, having to do floodplain mitigation, who's going to cover that? There's no flood insurance to cover the flood mitigation. Homeowners insurance might have a small clause in it to do code updates. My understanding is that is on some homeowners policies, but certainly not to raise your roof, probably not to fill in your basement, your mechanicals, to do all of it. So it's this huge sort of invasion, intrusion. Whoever's having this substantial damage has gone through trauma, and then to add sort of this additional trauma to places that don't normally flood is, I think, above and beyond and overreaching into what we're all trying to do. One other point of I have not made it through all this, but I did go to the definition section because one of the big issues that I see is the definition of market value. There's some like, okay, market value is going to be, the tax assessed value, which when you go into the definition, it's more complicated than that. Oh, 30 seconds remaining. All right, so I think there needs to be more work done to do this. I don't think it's ready to go tonight. Also, my neighbor, when I was talking to them, they're like, oh, there's no way that the city would make us raise our house and do this, if we don't flood, if we have a fire. And I said, no, actually, that's true. Also, many of our neighbors didn't know about it. So I think the city didn't tell us anything. will actually, you know, if there's more information, more people need the opportunity. Do they do it? Thank you.
Great points. Anyone else in the room?
I'm Steve Wallach, 83 Clinton Street. I was hoping to not say anything, but I just had a few comments. If I could get or a question actually. I'm not clear about what the definition of being in a historic district is and what exclusions there are for people who have a historic home, especially one that's attached to another historic home. I'd like a council to answer that question.
That's a good point.
Can a council member answer that question?
I can, but.
Okay.
I'm the mayor, so.
A mayor.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry, say the question again, please.
The question is what?
Yeah. Yes.
The definition
It
here
is-
was unclear to me,
The historic district's everything downtown, right? So that's everything downtown.
which means what? Is your house downtown?
Yes, my house is in the historic district. So there's something we have, so you can tell us what the historic district, it starts at,
The historic district is everything in the downtown area, so it would start all the way down where West Amwell and Lambertville meet on 29
Okay,
and go all the way up to just before the train tracks, right? Starts at the river and goes all the way over to Main Street.
okay.
But
So to me, that's not downtown, but that's, I get that, thank you.
It's the flat part of the town, is basically it.
and so that's the historic district, and you would not be required, you'd be required to get a variance. You would not be required, the variance will give you relief from raising the house. So, you know, that designation, we know that there's no practical way to raise houses that are built on fieldstone foundations, right, in a historic town. So the variance offers that relief. You do not need to raise your house. You just need to do, you know, you fill the basement with gravel, add the flood vents, and elevate your mechanicals. So that's happened in a number of houses already since Ida. I forget the number, Ken can tell us, it's probably been 6 or 7. But there's nothing in raising of houses unless it's voluntary. There is somebody in the south part of town who's raising her house. It's a freestanding house.
Okay. And my other point is, you're not gonna like this, but I don't feel that the council knows what they're voting for. This is a very long ordinance. It's a complicated ordinance. And I asked the question, and only the mayor could answer. So I really don't feel that you're ready to move forward with this at all.
Thank you. I would just note that when we're done with public comment, I'm going to run through the ordinance and it'll be a way that everybody can understand. So.
Okay, but I think it requires time for, this is a major thing, and it's certainly major for me. If the meteor falls on my house and more than 50% damage is done and of the building structure, which is not a whole lot of money, it's about $75,000. Now you can blow through that in a hurry. I feel like if I were voting on it, I would need more time. For sure.
Not just a meteor, a car.
Dave Bird, 255 Brunswick Avenue, not on the flat part of town. Been around water for a long time, as many of you know. My role as OEM coordinator here for a number of years. That things do change, all right, but this whole thing of going from 100 to 500, how many people, who's going to be impacted by this ordinance? How much is it going to be? I found it interesting, the gentleman, the attorney, everybody should have flood insurance. Right? Some people make that decision based upon finances. All right, and if we're forcing people by whatever we're doing, okay, I think it needs to be clear up front so people can make a decision. What I've heard tonight is that people really don't quite have their arms around this whole thing. I think it's an issue, and I give my compliments to the mayor and Ken all right, the people who were on that call. Not everybody's going to go on a call, okay? And I think that's just a fact of life. All right, this is a complicated process. I think it's wonderful to look at what we can do different, but I think we got to understand what that really means. Thank you.
Good evening, Cindy Yanni, 9 North Union Street. I'm just standing up to reiterate what the previous two speakers said. I've spoken to a number of my friends and neighbors down on the north end of North Union Street, and I think they don't really understand, and I think it's really more of an education issue. I understand functioning in government, we get it. I compliment the mayor, I'm certain he knows a lot about this. And maybe others of the council. However, I don't think the community is all that comfortable. And I don't know how long it would take. I don't think it would take a long time. I know you met, I think you met a forum last week, Wednesday. I know the people I spoke to didn't know about it, didn't attend. I'm hoping they're on the Zoom and waiting in line in queue to talk, but that's my only caution. Is I think this is great. I know we have to do what we have to do. We have to do it. We have to make change, but I think it would just be helpful if we have a little longer period to educate people.
Right, is anybody else in the room? I imagine there's some people online.
We have 3 people, Mayor, who have their hands up as of this moment.
Right. Can we begin with 3 people, one at a time?
Julia, do you want to go ahead?
Can you hear me?
Sorry, this is Julia. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Julia Taylor, 24 Jean Street. Just a couple things. Generally speaking, I'm in favor of this ordinance with the full understanding and empathy for the fact that this is a big change and is scary to folks. But I think the reality of living in this town is such that these are the kinds of changes we're going to have to make if we want to be sustainable over time. And they're hard, and I understand that. I also understand that I don't live in a zone that's going to be affected by this, but I did. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about these issues. So I'm in favor of this. The timeline, if it doesn't get voted on tonight, I don't think that's the end of the world, but we can't use my neighbor didn't know, my friend didn't know reason forever. There has to be an end to that line of, we can't do this because somebody didn't know. So if the vote doesn't happen tonight, I'd really like to see the city and residents band together to say, these are the 3, 4, 5 things we promise we're going to do to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. I do have one specific question though, which is in Ken's memo, it seemed to say that historic variances would be approved automatically. I don't seem to see where that is stated in the ordinance. And my other question is with section 107.2 relating to historic structures. It talks about a variance to the substantial improvement requirements, but not to the substantial damage requirements. So it could be that I don't understand the required language, but I just wanted to point that out and see if there's a response to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Ken, do you want to weigh in on those 2 questions? So the variance to historic structures will be automatically granted. That was the first one. Can you just take us to the language in the ordinance where that's laid out?
Sure, I can do that. I don't have the ordinance right in front of me, so I can't reference the number, but it's in the historic section, that section that highlights historic. And the way it is worded, it just says that variance to historic structures is granted by the ordinance. We had initially put in the language of can be granted by the floodplain administrator, and DEP backed that language back out of the ordinance and said it's automatic through the floodplain administration office. They can just come in and know that they get that variance. There's no application process to get that variance. It's automatic as long as they comply with all the things that they can comply with in the various different regulations all the things they can comply with that do not affect the historic nature of the home. So that's where it comes into where they fill the basement rather than elevate the home. If the elevation of the home is going to affect their historic nature, or it's impossible to because of the type of structure. That's the one item. And what was the other one?
It was about the variances of 107.2. I didn't quite catch the question. It was something about substantial improvement.
Yeah, the question was that section
Oh, that-
seems to reference only substantial improvement and not substantial damage. And it could just be that I don't understand the required language for this.
Yeah, I'm not sure what language it is, and I'd be happy to show you some at some other point. But it could be that that's just a section that only refers to substantial improvement and everything else is itemized separately. But the ordinance applies to all substantial improvement, substantial damage, either one.
Yeah, that 107, and Ken, I'll follow up with you separately. Thank you. But the 107.2 is specifically in the variance section, but I'll follow up separately.
Okay, because we did include the language for in the 500-year floodplain that the compliance only applies to substantial damage. It does not apply to substantial improvement in the 500-year zone.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Julia. Who's next?
Gina is next. Gina, you want to go ahead?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I sent a letter to the council and to the mayor today concerning this proposed ordinance. And everybody, well, a number of people who've spoken, prior to me have made a bunch of excellent points, and I'm not going to reiterate them. But basically, I can understand and appreciate the city wanting to, as the mayor has said, increase resiliency and provide some sort of coverage for future flood events. My concern with this proposed ordinance is that I wonder if it's actually doing what is hoped, because it doesn't seem to me that, I've asked this question a number of times and there has not been an answer to it. It does not seem to me that the city knows which properties have flooded in the past, which of those properties that have flooded have suffered from substantial damage, what floodplain they're in, are they in the 100-year floodplain, or are they in the 500-year floodplain, and whether or not the proposed changes to the ordinance, which expands the requirements to the 500-year floodplain, will be capturing any, some, a lot, all of those properties. I think that many people who are, own houses in Lambertville and are in the 500-year floodplain do not even know that their house has that designation. I don't think the city knows specifically which properties are now going to be falling under this ordinance, because, when the question has been asked to see parcel maps or to have a more detailed understanding of what properties are impacted, the information doesn't seem to exist or it's not available as of now. So basically, if the council votes to, and the mayor and council votes to approve this proposed ordinance on second reading, I think that what's going to be happening is that we don't know who it's going to be impacting and what the level of impact is going to be. I also think that there needs to be some more investigation and discussion about what the whole variance process and procedure is. How is the determination made whether or not the other elements, the other requirements can be complied with? Like I get the whole, you don't have to raise your house maybe, but how do you decide whether or not someone's basement has to be filled in with gravel after a fire? Or after, to use the example that Ken gave at the first council meeting where this was introduced, if a car runs into your house, how is the determination made that there can't be a variance for filling up your basement with gravel. What if there's no space for your washer and dryer and boiler and furnace in the rest of your house because it's literally 2 rooms, right? Because not everybody has a big house. Further, and finally, I know I'm running out of time. I'm sure I can't see on my phone how much time I've left, but I know DEP has proposed regulations that are going to be adopted soon, which expand the special flood hazard areas to the 125-year floodplain. Really, I encourage the city to follow DEP's lead on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Judy, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. This is Judy Gleason, 86 North Union Street. I spoke earlier to this point, and now because it's the hearing, I'm just going on the record again. So many people have made the exact and important point. This is a very complicated, very difficult for many people to understand and others to even know they need to read it. So I'm really joining with Gina and the number of other people who have made this point. Please let there be more time and create a methodology, much the way you all talked about doing it for the change in Church Street. Figure out what you've got to do and when you will do it in a timeline, so that people can get used to it and take the time and try to understand it, because they really need to make decisions informed, and they really don't need to find themselves in a terrible situation. And we all know we are a 2 type of flood town now, which we didn't used to know. We're a river flood town and we're a flash flood town. And so many things have changed. But I would ask that the comments and the detailed suggestions that have been made be, of course, taken into account, but that you give people more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Liz, will you go ahead?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Liz Pierre here, 44 Elm Street. I'd like to express my support for the updated flood damage prevention ordinance. I think we know that the next catastrophic flood is not a matter of if, but when. And while this change could be hard, and I definitely have empathy for that, I support actions like this to make our city more resilient in the future. I'm hearing from residents that they would like additional education, and I'd be more than happy to help with that where needed. Thank you.
Okay.
Just so you know, my neighbor is texting me saying that he can't raise his hand on Zoom, so there are some technical something or other going on.
Is he Robert?
He is.
The hand was having a little dance party.
Okay. I was like, keep trying.
Oh, hello all. Good evening. Thank you for taking the call. Can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name and address.
Name is Robert Trout's. Address is 89 Clinton Street. And I just had a few questions. Thank you all for addressing this. I'm sure it is very important for us. One question that I have is, maybe I missed it, but who would decide what substantial damage is to your house? Again, like my neighbor Steve pointed out, if the meteorite hits, I mean, is that substantial or not? And who actually decides that? And then another question would be, what are all the benefits that come with this decision for the whole town? Is that all been made clear to those of us it's going to be affecting, which is pretty much the whole town? And the other question would be, is there a timeline that needs to be met by this evening for voting? Or could we just simply push this back? I mean, there was some questions about some other things being pushed back earlier, you know, animal control, et cetera, which is, I'm sure it's a great idea. But this seems a little bit more substantial than that. Is there a reason that it needs to be decided tonight, or is the decision tonight? And thank you again. I appreciate all the work you guys do. Very much appreciate it. We're all worried about floods, obviously. So thank you again, and thank you for taking my call.
All right, thanks. Substantial damage determination is made by the floodplain administrator, Ken Rogers. And the way that determination is made is if there's an event and you need to know whether your house has been substantially damaged, you would come to the construction office with a list of everything that you need to do, priced out basically, and that total would need to equal, for a substantial damage determination, more than 50% of the assessed value of your structure. Do I have that right, Ken?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Ken.
And I do have a couple other comments if I could make them whenever you're ready.
Please go ahead, Ken.
All right, I could do that now. There was a couple people that talked about not doing the ordinance tonight. There is a timeline that was set by the DEP for this adoption. Actually, it was by DEP and FEMA of February 15th. Had to be adopted by February 15th. Otherwise, the city is at the risk of being kicked out of the NFIP, which would mean all flood insurance policies would be ineffective until we can get back into the NFIP. Whether the DEP would actually do that or not, or FEMA would do that or not, is up in the air. But the deadline was February 15th. If there's been an extension to that deadline, I have not heard it. And there was a comment by Gina about where those insurance policy claims were made outside of the floodplain. We don't know where they were. That was not provided to us by FEMA. It was only a chart with a listing of claims in the 100-year floodplain and claims outside the 100-year floodplain. So those are just answers to a couple comments. And yes, it is a complicated ordinance, but it's an ordinance put together by DEP. We've only made minor changes to that ordinance, with the only major thing is expanding it to the 500-year floodplain. Outside of that, it's almost all DEP language, not ours, and required language. We must adopt this language.
Thanks, Ken. Anyone else? Can I have a motion to close the public comment period, please?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor of closing the public comment period, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Move on to council comments or questions.
I have one, if I might.
Please.
It's the historic structure. It doesn't talk about a house in the historic district. It talks about a historic structure. The listing of houses is online of what whatever they use as designation is historic. There are many houses. It doesn't exempt every house in the historic district, because the houses are within that district, unless they've been nominated to be historic structures by an agency, are. So to say that, to assume that just because your house is in the downtown, like the flat part of town, does not necessarily mean they are historic structures. And I think I would like to get some more definition on what they mean by historic. What, 1952, is that historic? 1887 is it historic? It talks specifically about the structures, and it doesn't say anything located in the historic district. And as we learned when we talked about the Clausen House, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Clausen, the headquarters building is in a historic district, but it is not designated a historic structure.
That's correct.
Right.
Ken, can you speak to the historic district question that the council president just?
Yes, I can. The definition in the ordinance includes homes that contribute to the historic nature of the city. And I think the city went through the efforts quite a few years ago to turn the entire flat area, essentially, of Lambertville into homes that contribute to the historic district. And that encompasses virtually every home except newer ones, and there's not that many newer homes. But homes, it does not have to be a listed historic home. It just has to be a home that contributes to the historic district. And I think that is in the definition of historic structure in the ordinance.
Without it in front of you, I'll wait to talk to you after you have it in front, but according to what 1072, it even says the repair about a historic structure, the repair of the structure, the structure meets the definition of historic structure as described by this ordinance. There's no mention of a house. Who identifies these houses as historic structures in there? And I would like to know what the DEP thinks about this before people walk away saying, oh, I'm in the flat part of town. You can't, I don't have to raise my house. 1940, 1960, I don't know. And I think that's given the nature of the city and the design standards and the codes about historic preservation, is that I can't, at this point, that's the one, well, that's where I focused my whole life living here. But a historic structure is not defined, and if it's defined, where's the definition of what it is? That's what I'm talking about now.
Excuse me, Ken, this is Councilwoman Lambert. I have a follow-up point, and I know somebody's in the back kind of jumping up out of her chair. Just give me a second. So what I want to know is, regarding historic designation, what is the responsibility of the property owner to be able to substantiate that designation? Like what documentation, what criteria needs to, what certifications, whatever, do they need to have in hand to be able to make that claim and have it be valid?
Is my mic still on? I changed my screen. Yeah, it looks like it's still on. Because I just was able to pull up the ordinance through an email. And I'm not sure where definitions are listed in here. I'm just thumbing through it right now. The definitions are there. We haven't changed the historic structure issue from the old ordinance into the new ordinance. They're the same as they've always been. And we've done some variances through the Zoning Board of Adjustments for historic structures already for homes that contribute to the historic nature. And we went through that process right after IDA to make sure that everybody could do that. And I just got to the definitions. Historic structure, I can read it here. Any structure that is listed individually, like Mr. Stegman, Councilman Stegman had already mentioned, ones that are certified or preliminarily determined by the Secretary of Interior, that's a second way. Individually listed on a state inventory of historic place, that's another way, or individually listed on a local inventory of historic places in communities with historic preservation programs that have been certified either by an approved state program as determined by the Secretary of Interior or directly by the Secretary of Interior in states without approved programs. I believe that is the one that connects all of the flat area of Lambertville, because that has been inventoried as a historic place in the community. It all contributes to the historic district itself. But that is the best I could say on that, is it's straight out of the definition.
So I guess my follow-up question is, if it covers every building in the historic district, then why are we doing this? If we can all get variances, or maybe.
That it's not we are doing it. It's a required element from DEP and FEMA. They're the ones that say any historic structure gets to have that variance.
I didn't mean why are we doing this, Ken? I mean,
Okay.
why? That's why I take that up. It's not a question about doing or not doing, is how does that fact influence the effectiveness of adopting this? Since, I mean, thank you for finding the definition.
Yeah, and I think I know where you're going. You're correct. You're correct in that almost every home in Lambertville can get that variance and not have to elevate. But they still have to, if it's a substantially improved or damaged home, they still have to comply to whatever level they can without affecting that historic nature.
You know, I think from my perspective that just this debate over this point and some very other points where we don't really have all the answers kind of does beg the question. And I've done as much research as I could this week, and I came up feeling that I needed more information. But I do feel like, though, more importantly, I feel like a citizen, the public needs more information. I mean, we do need to, there's nothing wrong with repeating the sessions, but I think we need a little bit of a soup to nuts presentation in, you know, in this structure, just because I think we need to provide resources to people and you know, and where to get resources. We need to, you know, be able to have a face-to-face dialogue. You know, I called John Miller this week, kind of like our local resident, like flood guy, flood expert. He even volunteered that he would come in and talk to us about FEMA. I mean, some people, you just don't understand the 100-year, the 500-year. I have flood insurance, where it's going, what they would need to do with flood insurance. I think it would provide a level of comfort for everyone to hear some of those things, and also go through some more of this exercise of questions and answers on the application of the ordinance, you know, and be able to take a look at the map that, you know, I found on our website, but, you know, of the 100-year floodplain, the 500-year floodplain, but it's, you know, it's a little sketchy if people come in, take a look at it, talk about it, and also I think would be really helpful for people to understand. I worked at DEP, you know, the DEP standard, you know, is a thing, of course, and I've talked to people at DEP about it. About when we talked about the number of claims that we have outside the 100-year floodplain, and, you know, kind of get a picture to be able to understand why we're going there. When I mean, certainly we're a flood-prone community, and we lived through them since, you know, 1999, 2004, 2005. We could name the floods. Dave Bird could give us a whole flood history. But to be able to have to understand going to 500, why we're doing it, what that means, what the numbers are, or should we follow the DEP progression of how they move? I just think it's need to be able to make sure, as some folks pointed out, that we fully understand the flood insurance process, and we fully understand what the ordinance is doing, and talking about it one more time, and providing some resources to people who are here in the room with us to be able to answer questions fully, you know, completely. I feel much more comfortable with, because it's kind of hard to vote on, you know, I don't know, winging a prayer, but that there are so many unresolved informational questions. Well, I think it's going to be this way. You know, I think it's going to be this way. It keeps me up at night. And I wouldn't sleep last night thinking about this ordinance because of those questions.
Can I just weigh in on one point though? Because, you know, and this was something that Gina raised, and we talked about this in the meeting last week. You know, the data that's available to the city, for example, in terms of repetitive losses and where they are, and you know, we know where those are. I know where they are. Ken knows where they are. Nobody else is allowed to know where they are. Federal privacy prohibits it. We cannot use that information to put together a data or a map or anything. There are a lot of restrictions in terms of the data that we have, that we can share. So that's problematic. Secondly, you know, the insurance question is completely outside. It's very difficult for us to know who has insurance and what kind of insurance it is, right? You can't keep track of that, private insurance companies, I don't believe, can correct me, I mean, we don't know, I mean, we have some basic insurance statistics from the NFIP, right? But we don't, and you've got some percentages about insurance policies outside the outside the 100-year floodplain, but we don't know who else may have insurance claims or when, it's a good idea, well, it's always a good idea, but, I mean, maybe Ken could talk a little bit about the disparities and kind of the information that we can actually get and share with the public, which is, not.
That's fine, but I really think that what we can share would be important, and educating people and just reminding them, because look, people go on the Zoom, there are only so many people on the Zoom. There's something about selling, sometimes we have to do it a couple of times to be good stewards of the public, of just telling them what, giving them information. You have to repeat it, we send out Lambertville Matters, okay, half the people open, so you're getting to people, but you only get to people through repetition. And really selling, it's the environment, protecting the environment is important, but having people buy into it is even more important. So if we spend, the people felt confident in, in our assessment, I feel much better about it.
Damage reports that I know I filled out, right? That's a public record. I submitted to the city. Why can't we access those?
We have those, and we know where those are. Those are voluntary, but at the same time, I don't know whether we clear with people whether we can share that information.
Well, it's a public record, though. People submitted it to the city.
Even though, look, I'm not asking for this house and this house and this house, but if we have a display and we have a map and someone can talk to it, even, just, not figuratively is the wrong word, but just to express, well, over here we have an issue, here we have an issue. It's very, very informative to see and visualize and know what we're talking about. It would be, it really kind of might be the old-fashioned way, but a little face-to-face on this, a little looking at the map, and a little confidence in our decision, I think, with the public, for me, would go a long way.
I would like to have like a teaching where we could learn more about this. I don't think it's fair to have just one Zoom meeting that we announce, 4 or 5 days before, and we put on the city calendar the day before. That's not notice. And again, I asked for that back in December, and it didn't happen until February. So I think if we do these things, I think that I know myself, I'd be more comfortable. I have a lot of concerns about it. I certainly see the benefits of it. I'm concerned about going too fast, going from the 100-year floodplain to the 500-year floodplain, especially when the DEP recommends us that we only go to 125. But that's why I think we should have an event where we have someone from the DEP, we have our engineer come in and, give us this information. So citizens understand how it's going to apply to them. I've read this a number of times. I'm a lawyer. I still have questions about this. This is a very complicated document. And we've had a lot of people come out that have spent a lot of time, that have gone to the meetings, and they still have questions. So I think that's our job as government, to explain how this is going to apply to them before we vote for it. So I'm not saying we're never going to vote for this. I'm not kicking it down.
Oh, that's good. Excuse me, I apologize.
Yeah.
So that's okay. But I do think we need more information. So I would hope that we could provide residents who have come out, who have spent this time to do that.
I would just like to add my comments, my perspective. I think this is a very complex issue. And, as someone who doesn't live in, in this zone, I empathize with the people who really don't have a good handle around what it means to them. And I agree with the strategic importance and the environmental impact of going to the 500-year floodplain. I agree with that in theory and in principle, but I really think there's a lot of benefit in having some sort of public forum where the citizens can come forward and have access to question and answer period with experts in the room. And we might have to do that more than once. I mean, I'm kind of thinking back a couple of years ago when we were doing our cannabis ordinance, and, you know, Councilman Sanders did, actually Councilman Stegman, our Council President Stegman, who was only a councilman at the time, but did public hearings with, you know, with community, and they got a lot of feedback, and it really went a long way toward building consensus and support among our citizens for the ordinance. I don't think this is, the topic is different, but I think that the sentiment's the same. You know, I've heard people say they're in support of it, and I understand why. But at the same time, if you're not the one who's you know, going to be directly affected, and a lot of people don't even know. I mean, I would like to know, what can we do to provide people with some sort of reference or resource where they can find out, calculate, but like I understand, or no, I don't really understand, but I've been told that we can't provide a list of who's in scope and out of scope for this 500-year floodplain. But there's got to be a way that a homeowner, a property owner, can take it upon themselves to go find out that information for themselves. And I think it's incumbent on us, the city, to provide the property owners with that information so that they can understand on a personal level how it's impacting them. I think, you know, to just tell people, well, we can't tell you what, you know, we can't tell you specifically who's in and who's out. So, you know, but we're going to do this. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable. I understand why people are concerned. And I think we have to listen to those concerns and work with people to educate them.
Anyone else on the council? I'm just going to say a couple things, and then it seems like we're headed in a different direction than what I hoped. But you know, I think that one of the speakers talked about, you know, kind of following the DEP's lead with the 125-year floodplain requirement. You know, I think the city has a long history of being out ahead of the DEP. I think about Mayor Delvecchio's work back in 05, 07, something like that, to starting the community rating, getting us to a place where our insurance rates were lower by kind of hammering away at policy and making changes. Think about the Mayor Falls efforts to keep our freeboard height higher than the DEP. You know, I go to these I've been to 2 all-day climate change seminars, trainings over the last month, and you know, Nick Angarone, who's the chief resilience officer of the DEP, said something during a long speech. He was talking about the need to be resilient, and you know, he said all the easy decisions have been made. We're done making the easy decisions. We need to start making the hard decisions. And I think this community, past administrations and community members have stood up and have sought to do better, right? I mean, do we want to do, you know, the minimum, right? The minimum. I mean, who wants to do the minimum? I think after Ida, after all of the events that we've been through, the minimum isn't good enough. We know that the minimum is not good enough anymore. We know that this is going to happen. And no mayor or no person in government wants to come forward with bad news that things are going to get worse and we need to prepare. The singular most important thing that I can do as your mayor, in my eyes, over my mayorship, however long that is to prepare the city for the future. And that means working on resilience. We have people working very hard on resilience. And this ordinance to include the 500-year floodplain, something that I personally feel very strongly about. And some of it, you know, it is because over the last year, I have literally been in this since Ida. I've learned so much, and I want to move the city forward, and I want to prepare the residents for what's coming down the road. And this is one of those times where I feel like it's a very significant opportunity to do just that. You know, government has a responsibility to lead. I don't want to be I don't want to be following the DEP with a 125-year floodplain. I want to be 375 floodplain feet ahead of the DEP. I want us to be a stronger, more resilient community. And the way we do that is by making the hard adult decisions about these kinds of things. For me, it's a little bit like, it's a little bit like being a father. Your children are born and you start immediately thinking about the future, about setting them up for a successful future. And that's what my goal is here with introducing this ordinance. And it doesn't sound like it's going to happen tonight, but this is the thing that matters the most to me, is getting the city prepared, getting the city resilient. And I would say on a personal level, people who live in Lambertville should know better by now. We live in a flood community. We live in a place that floods. And whether you're on Clinton Street in the 500-year floodplain or, at the corner of Swan and South Union, this is a flood town. And I think that it's incumbent upon residents to start looking out for themselves and as well as, a responsibility that we have. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now because I don't think it looks like this is not going to happen tonight. Bearing that in mind, if somebody has something to say about the ordinance, about either, I would love to move forward with this ordinance. I get the feeling from the council that it's not going to happen tonight. And if it doesn't, we obviously are supposed to have this done. Tim, do you have something that you
Yeah,
want to say?
just the question would be, are you going to kill the ordinance or are you going to just carry it? So that it would be the
I
motion.
think that, yeah, the issue is that I want to get it done. We all want to get it done. And, and Ida was a great reminder because, look, we had floods early on and people were starting to forget that we were a flood town. And look at, we're building on Ferry Street. I would say stuff like that, we were forgetting we were a flood town. We are a flood town. We want to do this. And I think it's incumbent upon us as good leaders to bring people along and give them some more information and make everybody feel comfortable that this is the tool they need to be a flood town and to be good climate change and resiliency leaders. And just asking to give people that, arm them with that information and that confidence that it's, I think it works out a lot better.
So then the motion would be to carry to the March 16th session, right? With the idea that we would work on an education plan.
Well, I don't see why we wouldn't at our work session at the next meeting, do stuff right there. We don't have to, it's not a huge plan, but that Ken could be here. Do we need our city engineer? And could we invite John Miller? I don't know if someone from the department will come, whatever, to talk about flood insurance, just so people understand. And look, if you put it on the website, you put it on a banner, if 5 people come, we've done the job of selling and talking.
Okay, so
That's
the work
all.
I just want to get this
Yeah,
right.
well,
So
I'm
the
just like
work session
freeforming,
March
so I
2nd
don't, I'm
would
not.
be like an information educational type thing.
Yeah. it's just-
And then,
Yeah, could
so,
we just go through it? It's almost like doing the.
but you wouldn't adopt at the March.
I have a question for Bill. So if we carried this bill up to the March 16th, would we be carrying the ordinance as written, or would there be the ability, for example, to change a feature of the ordinance during that time?
Right, well, you conclude the public hearing tonight,
Right,
so you'd be carrying the vote on this.
just the vote.
Just
on
the vote.
this, right?
Could we not close the public meeting portion of it?
Well, it's gonna be on an agenda, so folks can talk on agenda items, but technically speaking, the hearing on this is closed. If there's going to be a substantial change to the ordinance, it would have to be reintroduced.
Right, so this is the question I'm driving at with the council, because I'm comfortable personally moving forward with this ordinance now. If the council, and I don't know to what extent we can talk about this now, what I would like to avoid is carrying this forward for another month and then finding out that, that it's not going to work, and then having to reintroduce it in April. Now we're imperiling ourselves by not fulfilling our statutory obligation to have this ordinance in place. So
I would say by way of example, clarifying a definition is not a substantial change in my opinion, but changing
what would say we
back
change
to
it?
the DEP
Yeah.
standard, that's a significant change, would require reintroduction.
Right.
So Bill, even if, I'm just want to lay this out, March 2nd, we have a meeting, a public meeting, and it's a work session, right? And at that meeting, it's decided that you want to change the ordinance. We couldn't notice that change prior to the 16th meeting? Because it's 3 days prior to that meeting that notice would need to be in the paper, right, of the substantial change
We'd have to have another hearing on that change.
at the 16th meeting. Yeah, so they meet March 2nd, work session. We do all this educational stuff, right? And at that meeting, they say, okay, we want to do whatever, change. Then after that meeting, I provide notice to the paper that March 16th will be, that ordinance has changed. The revised ordinance has been posted on the website, blah, blah, blah. What outline the substantial changes, and they can still hear it at the 16th meeting?
Right, so you'd have to get the notice out as quick as possible, because
Yep.
the notice has to be done 10 days before that second.
Okay, so that's.
So the notice has to be published.
But it would function as a second reading public hearing.
May I ask a question? And can I just add, if we make something that, well, we're not gonna make a substantial change without the DEP agreeing to it, and that's not gonna happen, because
No, that's not true. We could make a substantial change in the DEP. The 500-year floodplain is my idea. You know, the DEP requires, I don't know if it's the 125 or the 100-year floodplain, but we could, if the council, if there's not enough support for the 500-year floodplain, we would just basically pass what the DEP gave us. We have to pass it anyway, right? So the only changes, I believe, Ken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the only changes to the ordinance that we would, substantive change would be that we would change the 500-year floodplain to something lower, 125 or whatever the 100 is, whatever the DEP language is that requires us. So that would be a substantial change.
Oh, okay. Thank you for explaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to make that clear.
Thank you.
And sure, I could speak to that too, if you'd like. The DEP or FEMA requires us to delineate a flood zone, whether it's the 100-year or the 500-year. There is no 125-year flood zone line. What DEP is doing is taking the flood elevation of the 100-year and adding 25% to that, essentially making it a 125-year flood elevation. But the flood zone for us in the city is going to be the 100-year or the 500-year. There's no zone of 125 years to delineate. If the DEP makes it the 125-year elevation and we have 2 feet of freeboard, then we've got to go 2 feet above the DEP's delineation of the 125-year. We stay at the 100-year flood elevation with our 2 feet of freeboard, then that's where we're at. The 500-year flood zone, we're still using the 100-year flood elevation to base our 2 foot of freeboard off of. So again, there's no change from where we're at in our original ordinance for elevating or anything like that. It's just extending the zone itself to the 500-year zone.
So we don't have enough time from the March 2nd meeting to the March 16th session. But if we change the meeting from the 16th to the 23rd, we have enough time, which means I'd have to notice that. Now, notice the meeting change. It's just a suggestion, but it means that we don't have to worry about NFIP standards. We don't have to worry about losing our serious rating because we're moving on.
Okay, so can we start with, is everybody comfortable carrying this until the next meeting? Everybody's good with that? Do we need a formal vote on that?
Next regular meeting?
Yeah,
Or just the next meeting?
So what we would do would be to follow Karen's idea, where we would have an informational session on the March 2nd meeting. We could make the whole meeting about it if you want. We'll just push everything else back.
Yep.
Happy to do that. And then we will make the meeting on the 23rd. Is everybody good on the 23rd? I have no idea when the 23rd is.
We could do the 16th.
We can do this.
We could do 16th.
Okay.
The day is it's fine.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Bill says it's okay. It's okay.
We're good.
All right, so everybody understand what we're doing?
Yep.
Everybody understand what's on the?
Just repeat it one more time. We're gonna have informational
So-
session.
So do I need to ask for a motion for this, Cindy?
Well, we need to ask for a motion to carry. it.
Right, I'd like to, so here's the plan,
Okay.
if everybody agrees. We carry this to, the sixth, we carry this
16th.
the 16th of
Right.
March, right? And on the 2nd of March, we have a big meeting, full of questions, lots of answers, and so forth. And
Widely advertised.
Widely advertised, I
Banner
don't know.
thing, right?
You know, we put these things in Laverne Matters, 2,500 people, you think that's enough? I don't know.
Well, I know, but
We
people
have a
are
60
distracted.
Yeah, we have a
People.
60% open rate, so
Right,
I don't know what to say
that's-
about people are distracted, right? I mean, this is our life, this is our town, so we'll do the best we
Well, we're in the
can.
bubble. They are.
Yeah, at any rate, we'll do the best we can, and if the council's willing to accept that, we will do the best we can to get as many people here on March 2nd, then that's fine with me.
We'll mail notices to people who have previously, we'll find a way to mail notices.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Put it on the website, and then, yeah.
Like prominently on the city
We can send a
website,
separate email to everybody.
Facebook.
Super important.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
like the idea of the separate email, I think that's a great idea, that way people don't have to scroll through, it's right there.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, I think we should really focus,
Bill's got-
focus the
All right.
the
Bill's got
communication.
something.
One more thing, as a procedural matter, I would suggest that this be carried to the work session meeting.
Okay.
Because if there are any amendments to be proposed at that meeting, they can be made, voted on at that meeting, and then the amended ordinance can be voted on.
16. Can you make that meeting, Bill, just a second?
March 2nd.
March 2nd.
Yes.
All right, so I would ask for a motion to carry this ordinance to March 2nd.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye? Okay, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right, so that's carried. Good. And I'll keep everybody in the council informed about communication efforts to get people out. We'll do it via Zoom. For the record, I think we had 18 people show up at the hearing last week.
ordinance number 2, Mayor.
Yeah, ordinance number 2. Dash 2023. This is an ordinance to amend Lambertville City Code 2014, Chapter 7, parking, to add a handicap parking space in front of 41 Clinton. This was introduced on February 2nd work session, posted on the city website and bulletin board on February 3rd. Noticed in the February 8th, 2023 Trenton Times to create a handicap parking space in front of 41 Clinton Street. I'd like to open this up for public comment. If anyone in the room would like to speak to this matter. Okay, is anybody online who would like to speak to this matter? I have a motion to close public comment on this.
Second.
All those in favor of closing public comment, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Are there any questions from the council on this matter or concerns? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to adopt the second reading ordinance number 02-2023. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion carries. No correspondence. I have a few board appointments this evening. Human Rights Council, I believe I did send around resumes for Beverly Mason and Roxana Ass, both of whom have excellent resumes and will be incredibly well suited to the Human Rights Council. Are there any questions about Beverly and Roxana's appointment?
I think that a very impressive resume.
Yeah, wow, keepers, they were great.
It's like,
So looking forward to having them on the council. If they get approved. So they have a motion to appoint Beverly and Roxanne to the Human Rights Council, please. Okay.
Second.
All right, so we have like 4 seconds. I assume everybody's going to be an aye on this one. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next would be an appointment for Michael Harriet, who's already serving on the Parks and Rec Commission as an alternate. We'd like to move him to an unexpired term ending 12/31/2023. Alexis Behrens has resigned. Questions? If not, a motion, please.
So moved.
Second, please. Thank you. All in favor of appointing Michael Harriet, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Council President Stegman, do you have a Church Street traffic pattern update?
It's really quick. I contacted our engineer who is double checking to see if we need to loop in the DOT because the Church Street intersects with the state road at that point. So as soon as we get some kind of determination, then we'll be able to green light it quicker. And if the DOT says you have to get certain, whatever you have to do, then we're gonna have to do it. But in the brief conversation I had with our engineer, the thing that we have going for us is that it has already been designated as a one-way street. And we're gonna probably have to get some, whatever you have, if the DOT asks for. So I know you have, So, that being said, we can touch base with I'll touch base with the engineer and mayor. Perhaps you would like to be on that call, or you can make the call. I could take care of it. But for you, I never really had to recuse yourself.
Yeah, for the record, I have to recuse myself on this matter. I didn't step off the dais. I hope that's okay with everybody. I don't feel like it was a big ethical issue for me to sit up here for 30 seconds while Council President Stegman talked about it.
I put 30 seconds from me. You're off.
I know, yeah, well, it's not gonna get pretty fast. Okay, announcements. Convenience center hours, Saturday, February 4th from, that's already passed. Wednesday, February 15th, that's already passed. Saturday, February 18th, 19.
Sorry, I forgot to put March.
March, well, we have this Saturday, and you can refer to the website for March dates. Dog and cat licenses are due no later than Tuesday, February 28th to avoid the late fee. Please include a copy of your pet's valid rabies vaccination. Landlord registration due no later than March 31st, 2023 to avoid a late fee. We have a lot of outstanding landlord registrations. I'm going to start finding you guys. At this time, we have our second public comment period. I would like to remind the members of the public that this is only for matters not on the agenda tonight, not discussed. This is only for new business. Other members of the public who would like to speak to new business for 3 minutes from the podium. Yes, please state your name and your address.
Hi, good evening. Kelly Sullivan, 27 York Street. Last month, I came before the city council to ask for an action that would support the forward motion of the Strand renovation project. Many of our friends and neighbors wrote letters to you and to support that effort. Many of those people shared those letters with me, and I've learned since that meeting that many did not, and that a whole lot of letters came your way. And I wanted to thank you, and I wanted to thank everyone that wrote about that issue. And I wanted to thank you for all of your thoughtful responses, because I heard from a lot of people that they got really thoughtful responses from all of you. Lambertville is an ever-changing place, and what all of you do to ensure that this is a safe place where people can grow and prosper is really important, and I appreciate the efforts that all of you put in. I basically just really wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you for the forward motion. It's very important. I'm very excited to continue working on whatever remaining issues there are with the city of Lambertville, so that we can build a really amazing art space inside the walls of the Strand Theater. And it'll be an incredibly beautiful space that will be unique to Lambertville, and we'll all be very proud of it. That's what I wanted to say.
Anyone else in the room?
Laura Stagnino, you made it clear that I'm not supposed to talk about anything that was on the agenda. That kind of makes it an awkward situation tonight, because there's no way to actually have a conversation with council. Once we talked about a lot of things I would love to answer, had a conversation,
Yeah, you're certainly welcome to contact us via email or on the telephone, but this is the rule, so I'm gonna ask you to.
Yeah, no, I
abide by
understand. I'm
that.
just saying that it's frustrating not to be able to have interaction
Thank
about subjects.
Anyone online?
All quiet and Zoom meeting.
Do you know how many people we had tonight at
The next one was at 18.
18? Okay, you note that for the record, please. All right, now have a motion to close the public comment period, please. Second. All in favor, please say aye. And at this time, I would happily entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming this evening. Always good to see you here.
We're gonna do that the AFS or APS?